What is up, everybody? And this is a big show, big for the sport of boxing, I believe. Is Ryan Garcia fulfilled his potential of being a world champion? No longer can you just say that he is just a box office draw. He has now proven that, he can win a fight against a certain tier of opponent, which I think everyone had wanted to see since the Luke Campbell fight to a certain extent, given the controversy around the Devin Haney fight. Dakota, first off, thank you for joining me this week. And second off, give me your observations on this fight.
Well, I got to tell you, man, this is one of those beautiful moments in boxing that we talk about that kind of goes counter to any of our expectations. I did not, if I had played out every different scenario of that fight in my head, it would not have included Ryan pitching a 12-0 shutout in a boxing lesson of Mario Barrios. I just wouldn't have clocked that. And that's exactly what he did, man. I mean, he showed that there was times where he was kind of doing that, jumping back and forth, like stepping back and forth and changing directions really well. He caught Mario early in the fight, and it clearly set a certain kind of tone that I can hurt you at any given moment. And I think it made Mario a little gun shy, and Ryan showed a level of discipline in this fight that even at his very best throughout his career, I didn't know if he was capable of that kind of attention span. And I remember leading into the fight, like we had talked, I don't remember if it was on air or not, but you had said, like, he's not posting anything. He's not posting any, training footage. And in wondering if he was taking it seriously. And I think in retrospect we saw he was able to kind of shut the world out. And him and Pops were able to just get in the gym. And he's really a special talent where if you can just create some basic parameters of discipline and showing up every day and limiting distractions, that he's a real problem and he's a true talent. It reminded me in some ways, and he's done this many times throughout his career, he reminds me of Victor Ortiz, man. I mean, Victor had some very special moments in his career. That first Andre Berto fight was a true classic where he really showed his mettle. And then he would just let you down and break your heart if you were rooting for him. And sometimes I wonder if that's what Ryan Garcia is, or if he's going to be a genuinely, great fighter that, like most great fighters, had some bumps along the way. I think we're still figuring that out. But those are at least my immediate observations to what I would say is the best performance of his career by far.
So a theme I also saw in this fight was when Ryan takes a fight serious, which he obviously did, he has some physical advantages over Barrios, especially this version of Barrios. I do think Barrios against Ugas was one of the best versions of Barrios we've seen. But in this fight, if we're being honest, he gets dropped with a right hand, but he also looked like an older veteran who didn't have that same gear to keep up speed-wise with Garcia. He didn't have the athleticism. He looked a step behind, and maybe he always would have been, but it felt as though, there was a lot talking about the coaching and Goosen coached and whatever. To me, this speaks to something that I believe, and I did a video on this, that we often talk about coaches or fights, and there are special moments where coaches bring the most out of a fighter, but this fight really felt like, at this point, if Garcia's in shape, he just has some physical advantages that Barrios didn't have, and he can win a fight.
Which we basically knew, right? We basically knew that, and I think have always been aware that was the case. The question was, what of that would he bring to the dance? Because we've seen him bring it in spades, and then we've seen him leave it all at home. And I was just really impressed that he was actually able to show up and do it. Because, no, go ahead, Lukie.
That's what I'm kind of getting at, is that he weaponized that talent in a different way, where it felt like I think part of the problem is we saw him as a kid, basically. We saw him as a young person, and this is the adult version of Ryan Garcia. So it's hard to not remember, if you were watching boxing, when he fought Jason Velez and then when he fought Oscar Duarte. These performances didn't look like that. It feels like he's coming into his own. And it felt like in this fight, he was also able to adjust on the fly and see things. And it really to me, it's kind of started with the Devin Haney fight that he had some of these attributes. But the glaring thing that stood out to me was when he's in shape, And maybe that is a Victor Ortiz trait. I haven't really thought about it deeply, but maybe that is what Ortiz kind of did too. He can show up and he's just got different gears than other fighters. And there's a higher margin of error. And people focus on that he pulls straight back and he does this. But the offensive gifts and arsenal he has are very hard to overcome. So he can have flaws because of what the advantages he has. And in this fight, it felt like he set a tone and set a pace that Barrios just couldn't match.
Well, and any of the criticisms of him as a fighter that I would have had just didn't play out in this fight. I mean, he was consistent. He won the battle of the jab. He was the one that was able to make adjustments. Look, even against Devin, bro, I mean, rounds, 2 through 7, he didn't throw a punch. So even that performance had its ups and its downs and its moments where it was like, what is this kid doing? This was the first time I felt like it all came together. And I think that you're right. I think that Mario, even though he's a young guy, he's had a lot of tough fights, and there was a level of intensity that he just wasn't able to match, and he wasn't even really able to get anything going until the 9th round. He was relatively competitive in those last 4 rounds, even though he probably didn't win any of them. He did not have that same pull the trigger thing, but the consistency that I expected from Mario came from Ryan. Right? All of the things that I was expecting Mario to bring to the table was done by Ryan. And I think what was so funny when the fight first started, I'm watching, and everything I know about Ryan Garcia, I'm looking at him and his pops and how chaotic they've been over the last couple of years. And I'm like, that's a corner of chaos. And then I see Mario and I see Goosen over there, and I'm like, that's 2 pros. And everything I know in boxing says the 2 pros beats the chaos. But Mario had no adjustment. Joe had no adjustment. He was telling him the same thing. We got to keep pressure. We got to close the gap. We got to land to the body. And he either wasn't able to do that or it just wasn't working. And there was no adjustment on their part, on the part of the old pros who, you would think might know better.
The other thing I saw too was, and this isn't rocket science, I think there's a level of when you get in with Ryan Garcia, he's a lot faster than your mind can expect. And you just can't fathom how fast those punches come. And I think there's a period where sometimes
they're short too.
They're short, they're hard, they're quick. And I think he creates lulls in fights. Even in the Haney fight, Haney did not throw a lot in some rounds because it's like you're waiting for Devin or for Ryan's hands to slow down. And I think that first 20-second drop right hand, and a lot of people made the fact that it was a right hand and not a left hook, but to me, Ryan's landed the right hand throughout his career pretty well, and he kind of sets up his left hook at times with a right hand. He does the Nano Rodriguez, overcommits right hand, comes back with a left hook. I remember I was sitting with a really good regional fighter, Ricardo Pinell. He drove with me to see a fight, and I was struggling with a left hook, and I remember he'd always tell me, throw it off a right hand. So to me, I feel like if you have a good left hook, you're going to have a right hand because they're like cousins, right? Don't you think? You're not going to see a guy that doesn't have a good right hand without a left hook.
Maybe he just hasn't always shown that. So again, in the same way that Victor Ortiz would keep you on your toes, you just don't know. Are you going to get a true generational talent, or are you going to get a letdown? And on any given night, it seems like that could be a different answer. But on this night, he was a real talent.
So Lukie's overreaction corner, real boxing guy, and now he's living up to the hype of when he fought Gervonta Davis. At that time, it felt like he's overqualified to be in this spot. Now he's legitimately one of the more fascinating champions, basically because of the chaos, because of his personality, and because now he's had that special night. Now, I do think there's a part of me that is cynical and goes, was Barrios the perfect dance partner? Because there was a part of this.
It was a little bit.
There was a part of this where it felt like this was Pacquiao 2.0, except he's in with a young guy. And the young guy isn't going to be conserving his energy the way a 40-plus-year-old Pacquiao is. So, though I have a lot of enthusiasm for Ryan after this because he showed up, a part of me wonders, was this just an extension of kind of, Barrios having some lackluster performances while being a world champion?
I mean, both things can be true, but I'm glad that you called it Lukie's overreaction corner, because I think that there is some truth to the fact that, you know, just because he does this with this champion, I think we both agree that Barrios is one of the weaker world champions in boxing at the time, albeit still an excellent fighter. Again, that I felt like I knew what I was getting, but I don't know that necessarily translates to other guys that, like Shakur, you know, like a rematch with Devin, like Richardson, you know, whoever he winds up in the ring with next. I'm not sure that all of those things apply, but it makes him live with his peers again, because I wouldn't have picked him against any of his peers.
Now he's interesting. Let's read this question from Lobster 114610. Mario was tailor-made for Garcia, a plodding forward type, willing to eat punches, but too darn slow and not skilled enough to threaten Garcia. That was on prime form. Jinky Pacquiao was right. I mean, there is some truth to that. I would say the best version of Mario Barrios I ever saw was the version with Bob Santos that fought Ugas. And that version was really dictating behind a jab and staying long. And it seemed like after the Abel Ramos fight, there was a commitment to try to trade with people and stuff, and his identity got mixed up. And I also think that, like, we forget boxing's a physical sport, and there's certain times where you could be doing everything the same way, but your body just simply doesn't respond. And I felt like part of the problem in this fight was Barrios was doing the right things, but he couldn't kind of get off, you know?
He definitely looked like a guy that was having a hard time pulling the trigger, and he had a very fast, very powerful kid that caught him off guard right at the beginning of the fight. And I think between maybe him second guessing himself a little bit, but also I think struggling to kind of find his moments and find his spots, or create his moments and his spots. I think both of those things are true.
Okay, the next comment we're going to read will segue into our next segment, which is about Antuanne Russell, a fight that I was absolutely wrong on, and I'm fine with that, because I think that probably one of the worst things about boxing is, like, boxing.
We both did some getting shit wrong on this card. You know what I mean?
Isn't that fun? Like, I think that there's a lot of times people want to be like, yeah, I called this right. It's like, if you're calling everything right, isn't this the wrong sport for you? Like, if you're
boxing, how often do we say, Lukie, that boxing is at its best when you're wrong? Because when you get surprised and you get to either learn something new or see something from a different angle, it expands your understanding.
Yeah, so our guy, I think Gary Russell won 116, 111, a very hard stylistic matchup. Very impressed with him. I left confused from this fight, and part of it is Andy came over on fight week. It's hard for me to not believe that he wasn't jet lagged to a certain degree. Russell's a devastating pressure fighter, break you down guy. And this fight got very competitive in the second half. And now I'm starting to wonder, between this fight and the Puello fight, you know, Jose Rayo Valenzuela is a lightweight. He went back to lightweight. Is there an issue with Russell's power? And if there's an issue with the power against the top guys, how does he win fights? Because it feels like his style is built around breaking you down and strategically applying pressure.
And what does it look like if Hiraoka has more than one fight since 2023? I mean, this is a guy who's been chronically inactive despite being a legitimate talent. And we saw that talent, right, that I've kind of been impressed with in the couple times I've been able to see him. I felt like he showed he belonged. I think he might have won the fight. It was a really close fight. He closed that gap in the back half really well. I wasn't furious about the decision, but I do wonder if Andy had been more active coming into this fight, had he gotten maybe gotten started a little earlier, I think it's a fight that he wins. Or maybe if he's just the A side, he gets the decision. I don't know.
Well, the other thing for me is, it's hard to not factor in the guy traveled on fight week from Japan.
Yeah, it's like, not LA to New York.
To this fight, to have this type of close fight with a guy who traveled so far is very troubling for me. You know, because this is a world-class opponent, but this is someone who's compromised just based on travel. And he gave him a fight of the century. And I think that this is the second time I've seen Antuanne Russell not really have adjustments. You know,
Yeah.
it's like in this fight when Andy made adjustments, Gary Antuanne wasn't really, matching him.
Yeah,
And
he was just able to be faster in the early part of the fight, and as it wore on, that kind of wore off, and it just only got worse. He's kind of a front runner, right? So he might get you a little bit at the beginning, and it's only going to get worse. But if he can build that lead up enough and hang on to it, he will. And that's maybe what he did here.
to me, it's troubling because I thought he was kind of like a boogeyman figure of the division. And like, if he fights Shakur Stevenson, I don't see how he can win.
No.
Like there, and it's like, so he can't beat Shakur. And it's like, as he gets older, I don't see this style aging well because it's really about, like you said, starting quick. So, I mean, to me, this is kind of a troubling performance because I think he was a very highly rated top 25 fighter in the world. And now we have some serious questions about where he sits in the division. And for Andy, let's see him back. Let's see him in that.
See, but that's where I feel a little more pessimistic with Andy. Is it's like, why haven't you fought in a year and a half? Why is it that you're flying so close to the fight when it's an 18-hour time difference or whatever the difference is? He must have, because what that tells me is he's someone who's desperately lacking in opportunities and had to just take this by the horns and adjust. But it certainly was not an ideal situation for a fight that looked very winnable for him.
Yeah, and I think that this is the dreaded word in all of boxing, exposed. It exposed a little bit of Russell in this fight. Let's go to the next one, which actually didn't happen. Richardson Hitchins has to pull out of a fight the day of the fight because of illness. Oscar Duarte and others were very, very frustrated with him. What are your thoughts on this?
I'm not really sure. I mean, they're saying food poisoning, or at least that's what De La Hoya is saying in that little video where he's sitting in the gym or wherever he's doing. I don't know what to make of that. I feel very bad for Duarte first and foremost because he prepared, did everything right, showed up for fight night. It's tough for me to buy the idea that Hitchins pulled out because of nerves. I know that that's like the machismo cool guy thing to say. I don't know that I'm buying that. I could be sold on it, but I don't know that I'm buying that. Especially,
let me jump in here. It's hard for me to believe that, right? Because this is a big payday for him. I think that what it probably means is maybe it's time for him to go to welterweight. He's a pretty big kid.
Or what it means is I think either way, it means it's time for him to move up to welterweight. But what it could mean is that he made weight and was so depleted that he like binge ate or something to that. He drank too much water, whatever the case may be.
He could have gotten sick coming from New York. Like, it is the flu season, whatever.
He could have gotten sick just making the weight.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I think that like too many people are overthinking it. I think that the issue is this IBF rehydration has always been seemingly an issue for Hitchins. It's been something he's talked about. He made the weight, but something happens. I think that it would be a great refresh for his career to move up to welterweight and take on the exciting names. For Duarte, it's unfortunate. I think he's a promising guy in the division. I think he's probably the most exciting Mexican fighter that hasn't won a belt. Would you say that that's a true statement?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that Ryan's win over him is aging really well because I think we've seen Duarte kind of become like a world-class pressure fighter. I don't think he'll ever be the top of the mountain, but he's certainly a top guy that fights in a style where you might be inclined to think like this style will, take advantage of his limitations or whatever. But we've seen him now, with Kenny Sims and against good fighters, be able to close that gap and be able to fight at a certain level.
Yeah, I think that his ceiling is a Marcos Maidana like fighter, and that he hopes that he can get his big marquee fights against like a Shakur or whoever it would be, the dancing guys and the dancing partners, and get a win. I just think that it was like we live in a world where there's too much ability to react in real time. And whenever a fight doesn't happen, no one's like, hey, let's make sure that like we're in sound mind and judgment and we can talk about this. It's just like, let me immediately react as soon as possible when I'm devastated. Let's get, and I just feel like a lot of the comments in a couple of days, people are probably going to be like, man, I probably shouldn't have said that. But they were frustrated in the moment. And that's the nature of the beast right now.
I understand why people in Duarte's camp or why Oscar would say it. I don't understand necessarily why a fan might say it. But if you're in Duarte's corner, you just put all of that work into a weight cut and into a camp. You only have but so many camps in your career. It's not just the fights. So I understand the emotion coming from them, certainly.
Fight of the month to me. Frank Martin, Nahir Albright. Kind of have a strong opinion on this fight. Should I lead or do you want to go?
Please.
So I think that, and I'm not trying to poo-poo on you, but maybe I'm poo-pooing on you. I was always a little skeptical of Frank's win over Rances Barthelemy based on the age thing, right? We were talking about it. And this is kind of similar to the Ryan Garcia Mario Barrios win, where it's like, I'm impressed with Ryan, but I'm going to be like a little, is this a Lukie overreaction? Like Frank Martin, he beats Rances Barthelemy, big stoppage, big win, but he's a little older and he didn't move the same. It's like he gets in with Nahir Albright, who has the same physical gifts, probably can think about the same, very good fighter. And then this looks like a Frank Martin that's a little bit more stationary, a little bit more looking to load up on punches. And he got himself into a really, really hard fight that he may or may not have. It ended in a draw. I think draw was a fair score. But I think that it shows how sometimes style matchups create enthusiasm around a fighter. And I think Frank Martin was a part of a very special era of boxing in PBC, where he came up with Derek James, who had at the time Errol Spence and Jermel Charlo. And that was a very, very good gym of high-level fighters that built an emotional relationship with fans. And I think that people enjoyed seeing his progression around these good fighters. And he had this brilliant performance with Michel Riviera. And he looked the part of a top fighter. But we truly don't know where he stands, and that's the unique thing about him is we know he can beat a Michel Riviera. We know he can beat an older Rances Barthelemy, but we truly don't know where 1 through 10 he stands in the division. And I think that's my big takeaway, where we know Nahir Albright is a top 10 guy, but he's closer to 10 than he is 5.
Yeah, I think my being impressed by his knockout over Barthelemy wasn't because I felt like Barthelemy had a lot left in the tank. It was that I couldn't even remember ever seeing him get buzzed. And so for Frank to lay out a guy like that when I don't really think of him as like a big power puncher, to me, it was impressive. That being said, a fight like this, right? We've never really seen him in a fight like this. When I think of him, I think of him like the fight with Rivera that was very one-sided. The fight with Tank was really competitive and ended in an instant. And then we get the knockout of Barthelemy. We haven't really seen him in a back and forth, nip and tuck close fight like this. And I think you're right. I didn't see the same footwork that I've always seen. But I also think that Nahir is a tall, awkward guy who places his punches really well and has a difficult rhythm to get adjusted to if you're a more traditional boxer. And I think that he's just a real spoiler. So maybe Frank has lost half a step, but I think that we have to start really like respecting Nahir Albright as a legitimate fringe, if not genuine contender at 140 pounds.
Yeah, if it was a 12-round fight, Albright would have won. Frank's pre-fight win over Artem was suspect. I think that was just a close fight. Frank won, and credit to Derek James for that one. How did Garcia look at the weigh-in? I hear he looked physically great on fight night. He looked fine at the weigh-in. Yeah, I think that like Nahir Albright is a guy who's fully capable of winning a world title, but it's stylistically, it's dependent on who the champions are and if he gets the opportunity. I think Frank Martin, had a potential to be like a superstar type boxer, or he's trending possibly in that direction. And now we're kind of seeing where his ceiling is. And I think the one thing in this fight, and maybe it's stylistic, was it did feel like he was not moving around, that he wasn't using angles, that he was more...
Not that same bounce either.
That's what I'm saying. He was more earthbound, right? Mm-hmm. Didn't he feel more earthbound, pivoting? And
heavy shoes.
Heavy shoes, and I don't know. I feel like I still have questions about Frank, and he's fought 2 times in basically 2 months.
But that could be a piece of it as well. You know, didn't fight for a long time. Now he's being incredibly active. Is there some burnout against a high quality opponent? I mean, it's not like we said, these are not video games. These guys are not guys being operated on a joystick. It's a physical game. And is that a factor?
I think that we're going to start we're doing new segments here this year. The Frank Martin, is he using his legs in this fight scale? And I'd say this was a 3 on the Frank Martin using his legs scale, where the Michelle Riviera would be his golden era of a 10. So I think we're going to have a Frank Martin scale of the legs moving forward. Any undercard bouts that stood out to you?
Well, I was interested to talk to you about the fight between Melikuziev and Agbeko, because I remember last night you saying like Beck is frustrating. I think I understand what you mean by that, but I also think that this was a strong performance from him. So I'm curious to know what exactly for you is frustrating about him.
And just to let you know, Dakota, just full transparency, Dakota loves boxing so much, he gets off work and buys the pay-per-view when it's almost over and watches it in real time. And then like a jerk, I send him basically spoilers of synopsises, not knowing he did that. So like I ruined a bunch of the fights. But for me,
bro, in case anybody in the comments is wondering, yes, I worked a 14-hour day yesterday, got off as this was ending and started from the beginning to bring to you today.
That's the way we do it over here. So for me, Beck looks the part of a world champion, but it feels like, you know what he reminds me of? Let's do a Lukie NBA comparison. He reminds me of the first 2 years Blake Griffin was in the NBA, where he's just doing a lot. He's running around, he's dunking, he's high energy it's great to watch, right? But it feels like he could be way more efficient and do a lot less and accomplish a lot more. It feels like he's always moving excessively, cutting angles, loading up on stuff, and it seems like he gets into these lulls in fights. So I see a extremely high talent potential. I think the win over Darius Fulgham was very impressive. I think even winning against David Stevens was impressive, given what Stevens has done and given that was like you had to battle back in that fight. But in this fight, look, Senator Becko is my guy. I think he's a very good fighter. I think he came to win. But Beck did not make this fight easy at all. This is the type of fight where I think he was really trying to establish himself as a true world title challenger. And I think he really made this fight as hard as he could have.
I don't know that I agree with that. I thought he won every round pretty easily. I think with the exception of the headbutt, he really didn't take a lot of shots. He took advantage of a stiffer guy. And that angle that you're talking about, you know, that's him avoiding the right hand. And if there's one criticism I have, I thought it was a great performance, to be honest with you. I was impressed with him. I enjoy watching him. I'm a fan. I see the same flaws that you do, but I think what I see is an overcorrection. And the overcorrection is that since the Rosado fight, if he's got a guy hurt, like you could see in that, it was the third or the fourth round, he catches Agbeko, and you could see Agbeko stumble, and Melikuziev almost stops and takes a deep breath and then starts going, because he's telling himself, don't get out ahead of yourself now. We know what happens when you get out ahead of yourself. So I see perhaps there's an overcorrection within his camp around not getting out ahead of your shoes and maintaining your patience when you got a guy hurt and placing your shots. And some of that I think is good, but I do see an overcorrection when you have a guy that he had hurt multiple times like that. There was a couple times I felt like, put your foot on the gas and you'll wrap this thing up. But I also thought that he didn't get hit a lot. And so if the criticism is, well, he falls in, he rushes, he's open to get hit, I feel like he's fixed some of that. And I didn't think that Agbeko really had any even like moments offensively.
So I guess the way I looked at it was, and that's interesting you bring that up. I like what you said. So I should look at this as a developmental performance more than him proving that he's a world championship caliber fight and that he's going to maybe put it all together in a title fight. Maybe it's closer to like what Israel Madrimov, who we call the seesaw. You know, sometimes he's up, sometimes he's down. Maybe Beck the Bully is doing a little Madrimov on us, where it's like on these.
I just think that overcorrection I don't think that's going anywhere. And what it has led to is a less reckless guy. And reckless guys can make amazing things happen, but they don't always win. And I think now what you're seeing is a guy who's a little more calculated and maybe will be more of a winner, but he may not create some of those same like moments.
Yeah, the body shots and the enthusiasm that
I
he
like
had.
watching him, bro. I think he's fun. I think he's a good hang.
I like his haircut too.
You like that bowl cut kind of thing he's got?
Yeah. I'm feeling I think he's a top 5 haircut guy. You know,
top 5 bowl cuts in boxing.
Top 5 haircuts in boxing. Beck the Bully, who's his barber. It's just like a guy down the street.
He's got the Indio, California hair.
He's got the Indio hair. Next one, Conor Benn goes to Zuffa Boxing. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I guess my thoughts are boxing is messy right now, bro. We got some messy boys with some money running around this game right now. I mean, it's a messy little drama show. And listen, Eddie Hearn, for all the positives I think he gave to boxing in that first couple of years he was around, he's really danced with the devil a lot the last couple of years, man. And he stood up for this kid like no one else after being proven to be a drug cheat and putting him in great positions. But when you dance with the devil, bro, the devil don't have your back. And so we're seeing now, after the landscape of boxing is shifting with Zuffa's presence in the sport now. And a guy that Eddie just assumed was going to remain loyal to him dipped out. By the way, I think Conor Benn's one of the most overrated fighters in boxing. So the idea that
he's a B-side. I think he's a high-level gatekeeper to any star. I don't see this as a big signing. I created on my jog today the Lukie Zuffa Boxing scale of what would be the most unshocking signing, I think, would be Andy Ruiz. That would be at a 1. 5 would be Conor Benn. 10 would be Devin Haney. Devin Haney to me would break my mind.
I think that's fair. I just think that the story of this is less about Conor Benn, because I don't really give a shit about Conor Benn, if I'm being honest. He's a good little fighter, but it's like it's that British thing where it's like he's their guy, so they put him on a pedestal.
But Dakota, this is the thing, is like he's not a top 10 fighter in whatever weight class he fights in. Is he a welterweight? Is he a junior middleweight? Is he a middleweight? He's not one of the 10 best fighters. He's become a personality. And like you said, it's more of a British thing where he's become their guy. He's a British fighter, but he's never shown that he's a world-class fighter. So he's a big name who more than likely, if big names sign over there or do fights, they're going to beat him.
But I think but the story to me is about Eddie, because Eddie is the one that sort of was the initial partnership in bringing Saudi money into boxing on a real scale, right? Because that's been kind of lurking around since Mayweather Pacquiao, and now it's a real thing. He's the one that kind of brought that partnership with Turki Al-Sheikh to the game. Then you got this guy, Dana White, doing Zuffa Boxing, saying, all this real boxing, it's all bullshit. We're getting rid of it. You're going under the fucking dirt 6 feet under, and we're going to be the last game in town. That's the game they've been talking. And now the guy that Eddie brought into boxing, or the entity that Eddie helped to bring into boxing, is now a vocal partner of that entity that's saying we're going to fucking bury you. So what? Listen, bro. When like I said, when you dance with the devil, you might get burned. And Eddie's in the get burned part.
Well, that's about it. Like I don't find Conor Benn that interesting, so that's enough of a segment there. Let's go over to Josh Warrington, Leigh Wood. Probably the more fascinating fight to me was Bilal Fawaz, who I'm not even sure if you're familiar with. He's a 37-year-old fighter who beat Junaid Boston in December. He probably beat him earlier in the year. Now he beats Ishmael Davis. He's a 37-year-old fighter who now has 2 marquee wins and is a fringe title contender in a sport that doesn't usually have feel-good stories with guys who are like journeyman boxers or comeback guys who really earned his spot into this position. And I think he's becoming, like, for, you could say Conor Benn's whatever story, I think Bilal Fawaz is one of the feel-good moments in boxing, one of the people that I think we all would enjoy more stories like, where it feels interesting. Whereas Leigh Wood and Josh Warrington, I'm not sure if you saw the fight. We're just going to combine the two. It felt like a tribute. It felt like Leigh Wood has a little bit more at this point in his career. Josh Warrington won fights on output, volume, and heart. Leigh Wood is kind of the comeback kid.
I'm fighting dirty, if we're being real.
Yeah, and he also is known for, Leigh Wood is the comeback kid, right? And Conlon, Warrington, his thing is he's losing fights or they're close, and then he lands a devastating knockout. I think they've done a good job at growing boxing in the UK, and they're going to have a solid influence. But this didn't feel like either guy is going to go on to a big title fight and win it, in my opinion. Any thoughts on this card?
No. This was for the regional championship, and I think that that's important. I think the British fans have earned the right to see that fight if they want to see it. But for me, this was like I'm trying to think of a good example. We've had some regional fights here in the tri-state area between two guys that you kind of know aren't going to go anywhere at the very elite level.
I've got a fictional one. Joe Smith Jr. versus Shawnee Monahan.
I think that's a perfect kind of that's exactly what the kind of fight that I'm talking about. Or even there was one recently too. I'll think of it. I think that it was more for hometown pride between two, I would say at least regionally, great fighters that have brought those fans a lot of exciting moments. I'll be honest, because of my 14-hour shift, I did not get to watch this card. And I had no idea if Leigh Wood even had like anything left in the tank. If anything, it was like, I feel like Warrington might have a little more juice left between the two. But that's kind of what makes Wood special.
He's a fun character. Sandy Ryan won another world title on the undercard. Really competitive fight. Kind of concerning where her career is going. I saw a lot of potential early in her career. She's just getting into this habit of kind of getting into 50-50 fights with people, like exchanging and not using as much of the talent component. Lee Antong, I'd probably say Leo Antong is a good heavyweight to watch for. Dave Allen blitzed a guy and stopped him in a minute. And Tiah Mai, yeah, I think that he's kind of like a future broadcaster, right? I think the British fans really like him, and it's like he's going to go from what he's doing to...
The Brit fans, sometimes they're funny. They're so loyal to their guys that they almost like relish in like a fuck up or an underachiever a little bit, because he's like, think about all the great nights he gave us,
And also it's like if Davey Boy had to just put it together one night, he would have been a world champion.
They have a fantasy version of who their guys are, and Dave plays right into that because he does have some real ability and he has some things that he can do very well. But he's also kind of like a fuck up who doesn't train hard. So
I think that the best fight you could make, possibly, in a certain world, would be Andy Ruiz versus Dave Allen. I think that the British fans would love that fight, and I think Andy Ruiz would be a beloved British fighter after that fight too.
I'm surprised they haven't done Allen and Johnny Fisher 3. You would have thought that was Ollie Norton the way they were talking about it.
Yeah, that was wild.
Aren't you surprised though? Like, we always talk about, is boxing a business? If boxing's a business, Johnny Fisher and Dave Allen are just making a career together, it feels like.
Yeah, I mean, that was something, that I still think it's funny that like people, and myself, I'm kind of including this, pick Dave Allen to beat Arslanbek Makhmudov, but now they're picking Makhmudov to beat Tyson Fury because they don't like Tyson Fury. And it's like, wait. You can't pick Makhmudov to lose to Dave Allen, but then you're saying that Fury's...
But Dave's their party boy, bro. Dave's party boy.
Dave's going to the party. Tiah Mai Ayton, I'm not sure if you've seen her. She's very promising, up-and-comer. She had a very close fight on this undercard. It's kind of like the first moment where like the training wheels have been off and she had to win a tough fight. And I think it's really good for her development. It's just tough. Like, I think in two ways, being a young fighter.
Lukie over here dropping his mic. We're talking about audio. Now we need to talk about audio stands. I unfortunately don't know who Lukie is talking about, which I usually do, but in this instance, I don't.
So I'll send you the clip. Let's see if I can get the audio back. I'll send you the...
We can hear you, though.
I can send you the clip. She's just a promising up-and-comer that I'm watching that I think is going to be really good, but it's like let me get you the age. She's fairly young, and there's a star potential to her, and she started out with a bunch of knockouts, right? And I think she's like 19. Let's see. Yeah, she's 19, and she goes by the nickname Stargirl, and she had her first hard fight pretty much after starting her career with knockouts, and that's good. But I think that's also like boxing fans are unreasonable. They want like really star-making performances, and then when you get those developmental fights that actually make you better, they're like, wait, is she really good? And I think that's the conundrum with development, right? Now let's move over to another topic. This next topic is a fight we're going to miss. It's going to be Claressa Shields versus Franchon Crews. The fight is happening in a few hours. I kind of wanted to touch on one element of it, which is it's had a weird buildup, and it's hard to really. I'm going to watch the fight because I'm a sicko, right? I don't have a life, as you know. You get a lot of phone calls from me. But Franchon Crews this fight week, at first I thought it was like partially to build anticipation for this fight, but it really feels like there's animosity towards Claressa Shields in some capacity, and also towards possibly an ambiguous entity outside of herself. I don't know what it is, if it's the media or just the world at large, that she doesn't get more praise for accomplishments in her career. And it's just been a strange fight week. All week it's been a little off. It hasn't had that build to a big fight. I think Che Kennelly and Danielle Perkins is a very interesting fight that I'm looking forward to. But I'm not sure if you're aware, at the weigh-in there was like a brawl of some sort after. Crews-Dezurn had some form of an injury, got checked out. It's been reported by David Graceman, a Boxing Scene, very reputable reporter of a very outstanding website. Fight will continue, but it's just getting deeply personal. Crews-Dezurn is posting a lot of stuff on the internet, not great things. Claressa's posting things. It's a strange fight because the fight never really did a ton for me, but at least it was a ending of something. And it's kind of taken this twist where it's feeling.
Do you think it's like that because of their relationship? I mean, they've historically been kind of close.
I don't know, but it just feels like leading into this bout, and I hope I'm wrong. I really hope I'm wrong. It feels like it's not going to be solved by a fight.
I don't think it will either, because it's so obvious there's a massive talent discrepancy between the two. And I think that what you're seeing, and this is just my opinion. But I think part of what you're seeing is Franchon's kind of like deep down, she knows that. And so the arena that she has to compete with Claressa is outside the ring.
Yeah, it's just a weird one, right? So it's been a weird buildup, and it's kind of a shame, right? Because when it's all said and done, Claressa Shields is going to be one of the best women's boxers. And I think there's a case to be made that Franchon Crews-Dezurn is a future Hall of Famer. And this arguably could be like one of the last fights we ever see her in. And like, it's just, historically, it's strange. Who knows? It could be a classic, but it's been a very, very weird buildup. I'll say that. And it's just been odd.
Well, there's clearly something personal there. And sometimes we see that, like, I think about Floyd and Zab's relationship prior to and after their fight. But that was a fight where there was a massive brawl in the ring because Zab hits Floyd low and then hits him in the back of the head, and Roger gets in the ring, and it becomes a pretty massive fiasco. But those were two individuals and camps that knew each other very well. And sometimes when you have that personal relationship, it can get really hot.
Yeah, I don't know. So now we're going to move on to what we do better, which is talking about boxing. And in terms of boxing, we have some good stuff. Oh, and I also wanted to highlight Dainier the Fear Pero got a win. And Gabriela Tellez looked absolutely awesome on a Box Lab Promotions card. So shout out to our girl, Gabriela Tellez. She did really, maybe we'll get her on the show, and she had such a good performance. Maybe we'll get an interview with her on the podcast. Maybe we'll do that next week. We'll get a next week interview with her, if that sounds good. Crews also fight with Green, said Man K Crazy. So let's get into a fight that I was recently on a podcast, and they asked me, what's the fight you're most excited about? And my answer was Manuel Navarrete versus Eduardo Nunez. Was I wrong in saying that?
I mean, it's definitely, I don't see any way that it's not a banger other than the fact that I think that sometimes, I think it'll be a great fight, but I think at times people have this expectation that Navarrete, because he's a come forward, aggressive Mexican fighter, that he's going to create Barrera Morales, Marquez Vasquez types of fights. And that's just not his style. He's more gangly and awkward, and there's a lot of headbutts, and sometimes there's a lot of holding. So I think that there's a level of excitement around what fights look like that get attributed to Navarrete that he hasn't necessarily earned. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're also dying for that next great Mexican versus Mexican match. Arguably, the last one we've seen was Francisco Vargas versus Orlando Salido, off the top of my head, and that wasn't really billed as that. It just kind of turned into that. The more this fight gets closer, the more I think there's probably a talent gap, because Nunez kind of has to set his feet to punch, and he throws hard, whereas Navarrete is just going to let his punches flow and move around. I do think the excitement comes from the fact that Navarrete hits hard and Nunez is a really big puncher. So there's hopes that this could be an unhinged, frantic fight. I'm just excited to see two title holders who have a similar mindset going into the ring, unifying a 130-pound division.
Yeah, I think I think right now when we have, title holder, traditional title holder, it's weird that I have to say traditional now, but that we have traditional title holders having unification fights while they're in their prime, on a service that people are already paying for. I think that that's a good thing. And I do think the fight will be exciting. I just think that people get let down by Navarrete fights at times because they're expecting that kind of classical Mexican style. That's not Navarrete's style.
Well, and I think the other thing with Navarrete too is he tends to either just lose fights or be outgunned.
And the other thing too, think about when you think about Marco Antonio Barrera, when you think about Juan Manuel Marquez, everything's very tight and compact. There's nothing tight and compact about Emmanuel Navarrete. He's kind of gangly and doofy at times, whereas traditional, even though it's very aggressive, traditional Mexican boxing is very balanced, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the thing about him is it's like
coordinated, I think would be a good word.
Nothing about him makes sense. It seems like at some point his diet should catch up to him. Sometimes the lack of technique should catch up to him. And it just seems like he hits really hard and throws untraditional punches. And whatever deficit he has at certain weights, he's able just to hit hard enough to slow other guys down more than he slows down. And I think that a lot of times good action fights come from guys exchanging with each other. And it's hard to exchange with Navarrete because he throws such weird punches. And I think the visual of the way he throws punches doesn't look great at times. Like it's stumbling and clunky and awkward. I've shown fights to friends and they go, is he a boxer? Like, does he box? Does he know what he's doing? Like there's a disconnect in what he's doing,
For sure. Well, but that's part of what's fun about him.
It is an unhinged nature to him.
And is that potentially more like, is that the kind of career that Ryan Garcia is going to have, where you can get a fucking Dennis Baranchik fight that's a dud, that's really not good, but then you're still, but Navarrete has also been at the top for a while now. We haven't seen Ryan get to that position. I just wonder if maybe if there's a comparison to be made.
He's a belt holder for 8 or 9 years. I mean, he's held a belt for almost a decade, which is like, that's basically Hall of Fame status, right? If you hold a belt for a decade, you're literally one of the best of your era. Nunez, to me, is a big puncher. I think at a time he was perceived as a guy a lot of people were avoiding. Pitufo Diaz arguably beat him in my eyes.
That was such a good fight, man.
He gave him such a hard fight. The scores weren't fair to my guy Pitufo.
No.
I think that that's troubling. If Pitufo gave him that much issues with movement and what
Pitufo gave Navarrete issues, though.
Patufo's a really good fighter. Patufo is one of our. We might have to get Patufo on the show too. We might get Patufo.
You want to talk about Hall of Very Good? I mean, fuck, he's right there, man. He's been right there a couple of times.
Are we going? Do we need to do an induction ceremony? Does Sergio Mora go into the Hall of Very Good, or is he Hall of Fame?
Right on that line, isn't he? Maybe the Vernon Forrest one probably puts him in the Hall of Fame.
I think the broadcasting career makes our guy Sergio a Hall of Famer. You know, he's such a good guy, and he's built such a relationship with the fans. I think he goes in because of the relationship with the fans. I think it's a good fight. I think Navarrete wins. Any thoughts on this?
I think it's a genuinely 50-50 because, again, I do think that, like, discipline and technique do matter. Even though Navarrete disproves that all the time, I do think that there's potential that he gets caught with something that he doesn't see, leading with his head and jumping in and doing all that crazy shit that he does. But time and time again, he's just been too awkward and too unpredictable for more traditional style fighters to adjust to.
I lost my tab. Okay, on the undercard, we got Uncle Abel Ramos taking on Tamir Smalls. Talk about two guys that have the same mindset. How do you think Uncle Abel does here? Because there's two ways to look at this. Uncle Abel's either going to outwork him and put a lot of pressure on him, or Tamir Smalls fights guys that come forward really well, and he doesn't fight movers all that well. What do you think?
It's tough to call because I'm trying to see if Abel has fought since the Mario Barrios fight. I don't believe that. No, he is not. So we got another guy who's pushing a year and a half out of the ring. And I think, to me, that's going to be the biggest edge that Tamir has in this fight, is that he's got an older guy who's had a lot of hard fights that hasn't fought in a long time. And Tamir,
to me, has a ceiling in the fact that he's got a little bit of the Frank Martin style right now, where it's like he likes to plant his feet, he likes to hit hard, and if you're moving or you're doing some stuff, he wants you to stay there so he can do his routine.
Yeah, I think that's fair. To me, he's just going to be a little bit fresher. He's going to be obviously the younger guy. He's been more active in recent years. And I'm a big Abel Ramos fan, but I think that even if you see Tamir as a Frank Martin type, I think that could be enough in this one.
Shout out my guy, Uncle Abel.
Always in the mix, man. We love us some Abel Ramos.
Another Hall of Very Good. For sure. Arturo Cardenas taking on Jordan Martinez. That's a regional. Shout out our guy Felix from ITR Boxing. I believe he posted a Jordan Martinez fight a few years ago. Probably all over this fight. Cardenas is a guy that, he's had to take a hard road. He's like on basically a prove it contract. He's with Matchroom, I believe co-promoted with Scano Promotions, but maybe didn't have the deep amateur pedigree. Has Robert Garcia in a division that has some big names, but he doesn't quite have that name. So to get noticed in the division, you have to fight undefeated fighters. I think this is 2 or 3. He's on what you call a prove it path. And now he's taking on a guy in Arizona who probably sells tickets, who's got an unbeaten record, but relatively untested. And it's yet another time in his career where he's fighting a guy with like-minded goals and ambitions, and he has to prove that he's the better of the two.
I'll have to take your word for that one, Lukie. I'm not sure that I'm familiar with either of these kids, unfortunately.
Well, I would circle that for next weekend as a fight to really be monitoring, because that could be the one that stands out. I think another one that could stand out is Emiliano Vargas. He's someone that I think a lot of people see a ton of potential in. I want to see him kind of at the next level of competition. Guess what? This is the next level of competition. He's taking on our guy, Agustin Quintana. You might say, who's Agustin Quintana? Well, that's the guy that beat Mark Castro, albeit I thought Mark Castro just barely won it. And it was like one of those where I think the guy who was fighting Mark did better than people expected. So a couple of rounds.
I thought he won the fight.
Okay, so you thought, so we have a split. Now we just needed one other person to be here. But I thought that it was one where there were a couple of rounds where, because he was doing so well in the fight, people kind of judged it for him. You know what I mean? Like, where like you don't expect a guy to do well, and neither guy is doing all that great in the round, and he wins it. So Emiliano Vargas is fighting a guy who beat a top tier prospect coming out of the amateurs in Mark Castro. This is a solid test, because I mean Vargas has looked good to a certain degree, but we haven't seen him jump up to that next level.
I think that this is a really good matchup for him. I think this is the first time, at least that I can remember, that I feel like Emiliano's in with a genuine threat, even though he should be the favorite. I think we both kind of viewed Mark Castro's, the early part of his career, as kind of strange, at where I just didn't see the explosiveness to get to a certain level, and Quintana was able to take advantage of that. So I think it's good to use. He's a good measuring stick for Emiliano. Whatever I think he's 17 fights into his career, 18 fights into his career.
Arbitrary number, arbitrary number, but he's
getting to the point where we're not in the kiddie pool anymore. You're pushing 20 fights now, and you got to start fighting guys that have some merit. And I like that matchup.
Yeah, I mean this is a defining step up in competition, where he's taking a more serious route. Our guy Bipolar Boxing picks afternoon, y'all. Fun day of fights yesterday. And our guy Mike Ross, is that Mike? Let us know in the chat if this is your first time tuning in, or if you're a long time listener. How are you guys feeling about Claressa's fight? We did a segment, and if you go back, it's roughly at 40 minutes into the show, and I talk about how I have a weird feeling about it.
But we also just talked about the buildup. I think it's obvious that Shields will win wide.
Well, I think there's just like a Franchon Crews-Dezurn at her best uses a level of physicality and size to her advantage to overpower people. And I just think that Shields is too fundamentally sound and has too good a feet for that to happen. And I think it could be it could end in a disqualification. I think it's going to be a high frustration fight where there's going to be a lot of emotion both in and out of the ring. And I'm not just saying that because it's a women's bout. I think there's men fights that have emotion, but I think this is a deeply personal fight with a gap in skill, in my opinion. And that's when you could possibly see maybe a disqualification or something crazy happen, because there could be a lot of frustration.
I think that's a great point.
A habit missed once is a mistake, but a habit missed twice is the start of a new habit. Attack the day. Okay, a little philosophy given to us.
Are you breaking my balls about the cigarettes, or what's up?
I watched your videos first time live. Love the insight. Thank you, Mike, man. We're glad to
appreciate you, Mike.
We're glad to see you jump over. We hope we can keep you as a long-time listener. One other one that's happened, Elijah Pierce has taken on Lorenzo Parra. It's a featherweight bout.
Lorenzo Parra.
Yeah, what do you think of this fight?
Wow, that is a deep cut, man. Hasn't he lost like 30 fights in a row or some shit?
Well, he had a draw with Omar Trinidad.
Oh, I did not know that. So Lorenzo Parra has managed to stay in the mix. That's pretty impressive. Can't hear you, bub.
Of course. Why would they do that? Let's see.
Now we can hear you.
Now we can hear me. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm not sure you're thinking of the same guy. Let's see.
Aren't I thinking of the middleweight that got stopped by Danny Jacobs way back in the day?
No, you're not. This is a featherweight. This is a featherweight that's 31 years old. He only has one loss. He has a draw with Omar Trinidad. His one loss comes to a fighter in 2017 in Colombia. He beat a prospect that knows Pierce named Javon Woodward. And Elijah Pierce is one of these guys that's rebuilt himself. Our guy Bipolar Boxing picks will be at this fight, so he'll be there. I sent Dakota multiple fights to be at this week if he chooses to. This is an upstate New York fight. It's got Bryce Mills. I say hi to your buddy Bryce Mills for you, Lukie. Thank you, man. I talked to him fight week. Bryce is great. You're going to be in for a good show, Bipolar Boxing Picks. You're going to see Kermel Moulton on there, who's possibly a future world champion. Sharamay Patricio, I think it's very safe to say she'll be a future world champion. And Jamel Pacquiao, Manny Pacquiao Jr. will be on this card. So pretty exciting little card there in upstate New York.
I just want to be clear. I was thinking there is another Lorenzo Parra.
amazing. So we were both right. That's
The first
kind of
Lorenzo,
bet.
the Lorenzo Parra that I'm talking about actually had a really good fight with Jorge Arce back in the day, and had a pretty fun one. I remember with Celestino Caballero, and he was in the lower weight classes and did in fact have like a 15 fight losing streak. So I'm not totally losing my mind, even though maybe I am just a tiny bit.
Mike Ross in the chat. I absolutely love Carmel Moulton. He's so good. He's so fast. Well, he's returning. He hasn't been that active lately, but let's hope that he can get some active fights. I'm going to give you 2 other deep cuts for the listeners of this program that really like boxing. On Friday night, you got Terrible Terry Washington. He's one of my favorite American up-and-coming prospects. He's a junior flyweight, and I think he could be a world champion as soon as this year. He's very, very promising, and he's going to be headlining a card in the LA area. I'm not sure how you can watch it, but he's really worth that type of stuff. And then another fight is on Pro Box TV on Friday. We got Renee Tellez Guerron back in action. And with Pro Box, you might not even know who the fighters are, but you're getting a fight. At least one of the fights on a Pro Box card is going to be a sensational bout, in my opinion. Would you say that's me overselling it, or what do you think?
I think that the matchmaking at Pro Box is part of what makes it so special. And when you have good matchmaking and you have fights where the winner is uncertain, that's where you get great fights, and Pro Box consistently provides that matchmaking.
Let's see. So, let's see. Let me look at this. It looks like the fight card for this one is, let's see. It looks like it's Kid Vasquez versus Machucho, and Ruben Aguilar versus Louis Lopez is your fight card. It does not look like Renee Tellez Guerron will be the main bout, but you know what? That's also a good fight. Let me check on the box rec to see if there is any other fights added to this. Let's see. We do have on the box rec some fights. Let me see if I recognize anybody else. Xavier, I can't say his last name, is a good fighter. Oh, Emilio Garcia is a really good fighter. Yeah, it's a really solid. I'd say Emilio Garcia is the guy to watch for on this undercard. He's a really, really interesting up-and-comer. And then in the chat, they wanted to ask me in particular, do you think Gabe Flores should retire? I would assume that they probably come from maybe like my earlier part of my career where I did a lot of work with Gabe Flores, but maybe not. I am not in the business of telling any fighter what to do, because there's a lot that goes into that. And I'll answer this question with another question, but I witnessed firsthand some of, but not the full journey of Gabe Jr. And he's put basically 20 years or so into boxing. And though you could have any feeling you want, it's not your decision. You didn't take the road. You didn't make the sacrifices. And it's that family and that team's decision. And that's a deeply personal thing. And that's only something that they can decide, because if a fighter retires, it's not as simple as saying retiring. It's changing things about your life. It's changing your identity, right? So first off, I have no place in even speaking on that. But second off, it's like that's something that has to come from the fighters. I think that he still can compete. I think that it's just about right now, it's about what his desires are in the sport, right? I think that, there's going to be opportunities for him. I think that a hiatus from the sport is probably good, a little break. But I don't see him as someone that I look at and I think alarmingly he needs to retire. What do you think, Dakota?
I thought that was a very concise but diplomatic answer. I think that the idea of having to completely reconstruct your life is a point that gets missed, because I think that guys see, oh, you don't have it anymore. Well, just because they don't have it anymore doesn't mean they don't need the money, and doesn't mean that they, have developed some other monetizable skill outside of boxing. And Gabe is a young guy that there was a lot of hype behind that hasn't necessarily been fulfilled, that lost to an older, very faded champion. And so when people see what the expectations were and what the performances are now, I think the natural inclination is to say, yeah, he should retire. I personally, unless he's going to change something drastic, don't think that getting, to the top of any weight class in boxing is practical for Gabe.
I'm with Manke Crazy. I don't think Gabe should retire. I think that it's just about just reassessing things. I think that,
but is that going to happen? Is he going to find some other boxing voices that are not his pops to get into the corner and really change up how they do things? And if he's not willing to do that, then what? I guess what would be the point?
No, that's
a genuine question.
Yeah,
that's not me testing you.
No, trust me, it's fine. But I mean, that's for another day, right? But I mean, that's once again, that's someone else's decision, right? It's not my decision. No one's calling my phone asking me these questions. So I know his father deeply cares about Gabe Jr., and his father's always had his son's best interest at heart. So I'm sure whatever they decide at whatever point, it'll be in his son's best interest. I love Renee Tellez Garon, one of my favorite fighters. Well, sadly, it doesn't look like he's on the card. Say it. Yeah.
I'm going to go with Saeed Toure.
Oh, that's our guy, Saeed. What do you guys think of Floyd Schofield, Dakota?
I think he's great. I just don't see him enough. It seems like there's just like issues with his fight sometimes, but I think there's no doubt that, especially after that Tevin Farmer fight, there's no doubt that the young man's got the goods.
I think he's a fringe star, and we just need him in captivating and exciting matchups that move the needle. I think he's graduated away from even fights with our guy, Renee Tellez Garon, and I think he needs to fight other name fighters at this point. I think that the fight I would like to see would be him and Ashton Silva revisited. They were both supposed to fight each other a couple of years ago on a Jake Paul card, and I think that would still be a compelling matchup that I'd be very, very excited about.
I honestly think maybe he's graduated past that. I think that Silva has some rebuilding to do still, and I don't think that fight would be as compelling because Schofield has kind of put his foot on the gas in the last couple of performances.
So, what's the type of fight? Like a Lucas Body?
I think I like that matchup. I'd have to look at the lightweight divisional rankings right now and kind of get a better sense of who's around. But, yeah, I think that he should be fighting top 10 guys.
Okay. Well, that is your show this week. I think people probably will enjoy it. We enjoy you. Thank you guys for tuning in every week. Dakota, what are your final thoughts?
My final thoughts. What a wild way that the sport continues to unfold.
It's an exciting year. We will be back next week. Hopefully, we will be talking about a fight of the year type bout. And then we will be saying goodbye to the month of February. Dakota, can you believe we are almost 2 months into 2026?
It's pretty wild. I went to Mexico for work and blinked my eyes a couple of times, and it was February. So it has moved quickly.
Oh, we got one last thing. The rankings are Floyd Schofield versus Lucas Body for the title. So that might be an upcoming fight. Shows what I know.
Let's get it. I would love to see that.
Okay, guys. We'll see you next week. Take care.